Past the hour, multiple people are still missing, and more than 100 homes are damaged this morning after at least 6 inches of heavy rain pummeled rural Virginia overnight. NBC's Kathy Park is in Virginia with the very latest. Kathy.
So we are here in the disaster zone in Buchanan County, located in rural southwest Virginia. We've been here on the ground for several hours, and it is just devastating to see some of the damage left behind. So officials are saying that the rain started late Tuesday into Wednesday, and several inches of rain in a matter of hours, well, it can do a significant amount of damage, as you can see right here. So this is the Dismal River, and the floodwaters got so intense it actually pushed some of this debris right onto the bridge. And also behind me, there are several homes up on this hill. A lot of them actually shifted off its foundation. If you go over here, you'll notice even trucks could not stand the power of the floodwaters, pushed nearly off the banks into the river. We also talked to a lot of residents here in this community. They are just stunned and shocked by what they are seeing today. They say they have weathered a lot of storms in their lifetime, but they have never seen anything quite like this.
Kathy Park, thank you so very much. And that wraps up the hour for me. I'm Jose Diaz-Balart. You can always reach me.
And Tennessee basically got the same thing last year whenever 17.5 inches fell from the sky that caused a little town called Waverly in Humphreys County, Tennessee, Middle Tennessee, to basically become as bad, if not worse. And of course, we've recently seen Yellowstone pertaining to the rains and with it heating up and causing such of the water to melt. These are all part of the clashes of the atmosphere becoming warmer, that's holding more moisture, that whenever it does rain, sometimes it just becomes a gully washer, something that the system cannot bear or take. And we're going to see more and more of this because these are all part of the sorrows that it talks about in the Bible.
Reports in Washington as President Biden and Israel's prime minister took opposite stands on Iran today, the biggest issue dividing the two allies. Israel is sticking to its policy of continuing to take action to slow down Iran's nuclear program, even before Tehran develops a nuclear weapon. President Biden saying military force is a last resort, but insisting on diplomacy first.
Words will not stop them, Mr. President. Diplomacy will not stop them. The only thing that will stop Iran is knowing that if they continue to develop their nuclear program, the free world will use force.
I continue to believe that diplomacy is the best way to achieve this outcome, and will continue to work with Israel to counter other threats from Iran throughout the region.
All of this ahead of the president's controversial trip to Saudi Arabia next. A visit opposed by human rights groups, but also aimed at fostering closer ties between the Saudis and Israel. And here at home, NBC News has learned that a member of the Trump White House support staff is the key witness referenced in Vice Chair Liz Cheney's warning about possible witness tampering by the former president himself. That comes as the January 6th committee is preparing for a primetime hearing next week, a week from today, graphically illustrating President Trump's refusal to take action during the riot, and in fact goading the mob on with a tweet slamming his own vice president.
When he tweeted about Mike Pence, that's when the fiercest fighting began at the West Front where I was. That's when Mike Fanone got dragged into the crowd. Myself got hurt on my shoulder and my arm and my feet.
That officer, Brendan Cannell, of course, one of the Capitol Police officers injured on Morning Joe today. We'll have hear more from him coming up later. And also overseas, Brittany Griner, back in a Moscow courtroom 1 week after entering a guilty plea on drug charges stemming from a February arrest for possessing vape canisters containing cannabis oil. And Griner's Russian coach, teammate, and team doctor all testifying today about her character and her contributions to Russian basketball. But we begin with the president's overseas trip. This is the biggest trip that he's taken, most important, certainly this year. Joining me now is NBC News Chief White House Correspondent Peter Alexander in Jerusalem and Washington Post Foreign Affairs columnist David Ignatius. Peter, on Iran, the president also discussing the potential for nuclear talks. We heard those differences in language on Iran just a few moments ago. Let's talk about that. The president emphasizing that he would take military action, as he told an Israeli journalist, as a last resort, and taking a strong line saying that, we're not going to wait forever for Iran to come back to the negotiating table. But certainly disagreeing with the Israeli prime minister. They've been taking covert and kinetic, military action, for years now against Iran to slow down its nuclear program.
Yeah, Andrea, that's exactly right. So these two men, the prime minister here, Yair Lapid of Israel, and President Biden together, signed this joint agreement today, a declaration with a shared commitment that they would never allow Iran to acquire a nuclear weapon. But there are certainly differences in the way that they get there. As you heard from Lapid, the prime minister, Israel's desire is that there is a credible military threat, that it's only the use of force that will push Iran back from the brink of trying to develop not just a nuclear weapon, but even to develop a nuclear program. And from the president, he kept open that glimmer of hope that there would be diplomacy. As you heard the president saying, that's his preferred route. He did in that interview earlier this week, saying as a last resort, the U.S. would be willing to use military force. And Lapid says there's no difference between the two, but certainly it is that difference between the U.S.'s effort to use diplomacy and also the U.S. basically setting the line at the production of a nuclear weapon, not the production or the capability to produce a nuclear weapon, with the belief system that they're really only a matter of weeks or perhaps months away from advancing that nuclear program. It is notable, Andrea, that it's 7 years to the day since the Obama-Biden administration joined in, announced that JCPOA, that Iran nuclear deal. Donald Trump, the past president, pulled the U.S. out. The president did, as you say that he would not wait forever, though, for Iran to come back to the bargaining table to renegotiate a revived deal, Andrea.
And there's certainly no sign that they're willing to do that right now. David Ignatius, you are, the best expert of all on Saudi Arabia, both because of your colleague and friend Jamal Khashoggi, but also for years following their activities in the region. And how are you reading this trip right now? Amnesty International, other human rights groups, bitterly opposing it. Other senators now saying, well, if we can get concessions from them on human rights, it's okay, because there is a larger issue.
Andrea, I think President Biden put it pretty succinctly today in his press conference in Israel. He said the trip to Saudi Arabia is about U.S. interests. And in saying that, he's implicitly saying that it's not about U.S. values, U.S. principles. I think on that issue, he sounded a little defensive, talked about how he has spoken in the past about Jamal Khashoggi, takes the issue seriously, but he's going to Saudi Arabia for a different purpose, and that is to rebuild the U.S. Security relationship, to try to get Saudi cooperation on oil production, to do things that we usually refer to as realpolitik, and that is the triumph of power and interests over values. So that's what this trip is going to be about. Biden, I think, if you read carefully, is admitting as much. It'd be extraordinary to be a fly on the wall in a private meeting where MBS and Biden will first encounter each other. Will Biden tell him privately how upset, angry, insistent on some kind of accountability the United States is, or will he let it go? We probably won't know about that private conversation. We'll all be watching to see whether there's a photograph, a handshake between President Biden and Mohammed bin Salman. But this, again, to underline, as Biden says, this trip is about interests, and in that sense, it overrides our values.
Well, David and Peter, let's listen to the president, the way he framed it today at that news conference with the Israeli prime minister.
I have never been quiet about talking about human rights. The question the reason I'm going to Saudi Arabia, though, is much broader, is to promote U.S. interests. I'm meeting with 9 other heads of state, It's not just it happens to be in Saudi Arabia. I always bring up human rights. But my position on Khashoggi has been so clear. If anyone doesn't understand it in Saudi Arabia or anywhere else, then they haven't been around for a while.
He's certainly indicating that it'll be a private conversation, David, that it's not going to be a public denunciation as it was when he was talking during the campaign.
So, Andrea, I think that the point to underline is what the United States should be seeking is assurances that nothing like this could ever happen again, that Mohammed bin Salman takes seriously our insistence that Saudi Arabia has to control its security forces, that an American journalist, a Saudi journalist for that matter, outside Saudi Arabia, would never be subject to the kind of brutal operation that Jamal Khashoggi, my colleague, was. And those assurances haven't been made. And I hope President Biden doesn't leave the kingdom without getting some indication, some clear statement, public or private, from the Saudi leader that he's taking steps to make sure that what happened won't happen again.
And as well as John Brennan was telling us yesterday, is that some of the people being held and some of the children of leading figures in Saudi Arabia, dissidents who are being punished, will be released. Peter, finally, I know the White House traveling press has been told going into Israel that there'd be, because of COVID rules, there would be no handshakes and there'd just be fist bumps, but they couldn't control Bibi Netanyahu wanting a big handshake with the president, and they certainly can't control Joe Biden hugging Holocaust victims. So what do you think we'll see in Saudi Arabia?
Well, Andrea, obviously this is a hands-on president, and so it was no surprise that you would see him first bumping fists, as the White House indicated he would, as an effort to try to avoid COVID, but it clearly gave them an opportunity to try to avoid a handshake, that awkward photo op with MBS in Saudi Arabia as well. But as you noted, just minutes after his arrival here, he was shaking hands, gripping hands with Bibi Netanyahu, embracing the Holocaust survivors, and even just within the last hour or so, he was holding hands for an extended period of time with Israel's President Isaac Herzog, who presented President Biden with the Presidential Medal of Honor. So if they're going to say that that's the reason why he wouldn't shake hands with MBS in Saudi Arabia, I think the president has proven that he's willing to overlook that protocol. Andrea?
Yeah, and President Herzog from an illustrious family, including a grandfather who was the chief, rabbi in Ireland, and knew Joe Biden and Biden's parentage back then. So, this is all old home week in Israel for Joe Biden, or he'd like it to be. Thank you very much. Peter Alexander, David Ignatius, great to see you both.
But in all seriousness, this is a serious heat wave, and the health authorities are
Dominic Chu from CNBC, thank you. And Europe is under the grip of blistering heat wave. Blistering heat wave that is drying up rivers, wilting crops, shutting down power plants. The scorching heat threatening to spur a further increase in food and energy prices as inflation is equally high there, if not higher in some countries. NBC's Claudio Levanga is in Rome. Claudio, so the International Federation of the Red Cross now urging cities to prepare for further disasters. What are communities doing in Rome and in Italy?
Hey, Andrea. Well, in places like Rome, we are quite lucky because we have several ways to cool down. Now, you can see right next to me there is a drinking fountain with people drinking from it. Behind me, there's a big fountain. It's illegal to jump into fountains, and it reminds everyone, especially tourists, but people do anyway when it's so hot. And then there is, of course, a lot of gelaterias, any excuse to get an ice cream. But in all seriousness, this is a serious heat wave, and the health authorities are advising everyone, including, especially the the elderly and the most vulnerable to either stay indoors or stay in the shade, do not stay in the sunshine, and hydrate a lot, because some meteorologists are saying, as AccuWeather are saying, that this is going to be the worst heat wave in 200 years. And I'm telling you, this is feeling really hot already. Now, Italian meteorologists have a habit of giving names to heat waves. This is how many we have. Well, the previous one a couple of weeks ago, they called it Karen, like the ferryman for the damned. Well, guess what? This one, they called it Apocalypse. Well, just just to tell you how hot they think it's going to be. And this is not just Italy and Rome, of course, that is so hot. It's all over Europe. Spain and Portugal are experiencing forest fires all over the places. Now, France today is Bastille Day, the French national day when they celebrate for the past few hundred years. They've been celebrating the downfall of the monarchy. Of course, they had all these fireworks displayed, laid out, but they had to cancel many of them because they're afraid that people are going to crowd over in this heat and people are not going to feel well. And the weather is too hot to bear in many other places in Europe, including England, Belgium, the Netherlands, you name it, Andrea.
Wow. Well, it still is beautiful. It's still Rome. Thank you so much, Claudia Lavanga, reporting from Italy. And playing defense, Brittany Griner back in a Russian courtroom today.
Between the flooding and the fires, the world is reeking, just as the Bible talks about, with great distress, great sorrows that are only intensifying rather than getting better. Only intensifying rather than getting better.
An American statesman depicting a minute-by-minute timeline showing authorities were inside the elementary school, law enforcement with body armor, within minutes of the gunman attacking the children, but ran in retreat from the gunfire, while the children and two teachers were crying for help. So within minutes they were there, then they ran away, and then they were there for more than an hour doing nothing. Uvalde families were here in our nation's capital yesterday demanding answers, with victims as young as this 10-year-old calling for change.
No one has to go through what I've gone through at school. I felt sad because most of my friends passed away.
Joining us now, NBC's Antonio Hilton in Uvalde, Texas. Antonio, what are the families saying? What are they learning now after the leak of this footage so outraged them?
Well, Andrea, here on the ground, people are experiencing some conflicting emotions right now. For some, the media is the hero in this story. They were able to early release footage that they believe is going to push officials to take more accountability, to get more answers ahead of a meeting that was initially scheduled for Sunday morning. But on the other hand, there are some people for whom this was an utter gut punch, just a traumatizing shock. They went on Twitter or they turned on their TVs and they saw what they describe as the last few minutes of some of their loved ones or neighbors' lives, and it's something that many of them did not want to watch or did not necessarily feel ready to experience. And so, people here are really grappling with just the shock of all of this still. And, while they knew that the footage would show over an hour of inaction, I think seeing it is something different, right? And, in addition to that anger has led to some of these viral moments, one of which we're now learning some new important context about. So, in the footage, at one point, you see an officer who checks his cell phone. Well, we've learned from a Texas lawmaker involved in the investigating House committee named Representative Moody that that's Officer Ruben Ruiz, who is the husband of Eva Mireles, one of the two teachers murdered by the gunman. His wife had reached out to him to let him know that she was shot and lay there dying, and he eventually had his gun taken from him and had to be escorted out. And while we don't see all of that unfold in this tape, it gives us some additional understanding of emotionally what some of those officers were going through on the ground that day. And we expect to learn more when, lawmakers release this report in just a couple days now, Andrea.
It still doesn't answer why there was no leadership there at all. And we've got schools starting just in a couple of weeks now. They have a summer session. So how is the community going to handle all that?
Well, school is weighing on the minds of people here quite heavily. And in fact, Andrea, as I've talked to people here in town, I'm hearing that a lot of people are considering taking their kids into local Catholic schools or finding somewhere else for them to get educated because they are just not sure that they trust school officials, that their kids are going to feel safe walking back into the school system. Take a listen to one of the conversations that our colleague Sam Brock had with Anna Rodriguez. She is the mother of Maite, a 10-year-old who lost her life that day.
There is a video now out there in the world, floating around on the internet for the remainder of my days and my children's days, of their sisters' last moments. They failed our community, they failed our kids. Our kids and our teachers paid the price for their failure.
Families want more answers, and they're hoping that when a report comes out from lawmakers on Sunday morning, it gives them more of them. Andrea?
It's just heartbreaking. Thank you, Antonia. And a history-making moment on Capitol Hill. Civil rights icon and trailblazing educator Mary McLeod Bethune became the first Black person to have a state-commissioned statue in Statuary Hall in the Capitol. The white marble statue showing Bethune in academic robes, holding a black rose. She was known to endearingly call all her students Black Roses. Her statue replaces one of a Confederate general who was among one of the last to surrender after the Civil War. Among her many achievements, she's perhaps best remembered for founding the school now known as the Bethune-Cookman University in Florida, which she started as a girls' school in 1904.
Wow. That's well overdue right there. That's well overdue.
And the nation today closing an historic chapter in American history because Herschel Woody Williams, the last World War II Medal of Honor recipient, is lying in honor at the Capitol Rotunda. It is a rare but fitting honor, of course, for this U.S. war hero. During the Battle of Iwo Jima, Williams saved fellow Marines pinned down for 4 hours using only a flamethrower. He was just 22 at the time, and after the war, Williams continued to serve, working for decades at the Department of Veterans Affairs. He was also a driving force behind Gold Star family memorials in more than 100 communities. He's had many honors over the years, including a Super Bowl coin toss and a naval ship named after him, but Medal of Honor for his actions at Iwo Jima, of course, remains the most important. Williams said he only held it in trust for all the Marines who did not come back. Woody Williams, a prime example of the greatest generation.
Another one that's well deserved. Long overdue.
Thanks for watching today. Thanks for being with us. Chris Jansing report starts just after this.
Well, while he suggested it's yes, he didn't say that outright, just as we don't know whether it's merely meant to distract from what has been the hottest topic in Washington. Who was former President Trump trying to get in touch with when he reached out to one of the January 6th committee witnesses? What was he planning to tell them? And could that call ultimately amount to evidence of witness tampering by Donald Trump? Here's what we know. NBC News has confirmed it was a member of the White House support staff, potentially someone who would be in a prime position to confirm testimony from people like Cassidy Hutchinson. But according to CNN, it was not someone routinely in touch with the former president. The Justice Department is now in possession of that information, just one of several threads they're following. But the pace of the DOJ investigation and the fact that they are coming to the committee for information has led to a lot of frustration, even from committee members themselves.
They've got potent tools to get information. They can enforce their own subpoenas in a way we can't. And the idea that a year and a half after these events, they would not have talked to these witnesses, even the Fulton County District Attorney is way ahead of them, is I think, cause for great concern.
And on Wednesday, committee chair Benny Thompson said the DOJ had asked for the evidence and witness transcripts related to a plot to create slates of fake pro-Trump electors in battleground states. This is notable because it's the only specific topic the department has raised with the committee. And then there's this revelation from Capitol Police Officer Aquilino Gonal, the man so badly beaten on January 6th. He was forced to retire. This morning, he said lawmakers, notably Republicans, who he put his life on the line to protect, seem now to want nothing to do with him.
Sometimes I run into them in the hallway, and then they pretend not to see me. They avoid me, or both to the right or to the left, or pretend to be doing something else. In a year and a half since I was injured, and they know my injuries, only Adam Kinzinger and Liz Cheney have approached me from the other side. It's disheartening. I'm not saying that I need that from them, but that shows a lot from the people who claim that they support the police and Back the Blue and are pro law and order.
And that cancer is coming from within. To give you an idea where the stain or the corruption or the abscess of respect or disrespect begins, it's beginning at the top. Thanks again. Good luck to all of us, and shalom.